Imagine stepping up to a podium in 1893.
Okay.
You're far from home, facing this absolute sea of thousands of people from a completely different culture. I mean, most of them have never seen anyone who looks like you, dresses like you, or, believes what you believe.
Right. The tension in that room must have been incredible.
Oh, totally thick with anticipation and definitely some skepticism.
Yeah.
And then you speak just 5 words.
Just 5.
5 words. And with those 5 words, the entire crowd just rises to their feet in this deafening standing ovation, and you completely change how the Western world views spirituality forever.
It's really a remarkable historical moment to visualize. Just the sheer power of the right words delivered at the exact right time, but carrying, the weight of thousands of years of thought behind them.
Exactly. Welcome, everyone, to this very special deep dive for the Simplified Summary YouTube channel. We are incredibly glad you're hanging out with us today.
Thrilled to be here.
And hey, before we jump into this massive topic, I just want to humbly and warmly ask you to hit that subscribe button, maybe drop a like on this video, and share it with fellow learners who love exploring really profound ideas.
Yeah, your support is exactly what keeps these deep dives going.
It means the absolute world to us, really. So today we are immersing ourselves in a truly monumental body of work. We're talking about the complete works of Swami Vivekananda.
It is massive.
It is. We're specifically drawing from the extensive introductions to his life, his groundbreaking addresses in Volume 1, which includes that famous speech at the 1893 Chicago Parliament of Religions we just teased,
Right.
and his really complex philosophical teachings in Volumes 2 and 3. We are going to explore his views on the soul, the universe, practical action, and the ultimate unity of all religions.
Basically, we're unpacking how ancient wisdom was translated for the modern world.
That is the mission. But before we get into the actual mechanics of his philosophy, we need to set some ground rules for our discussion today.
Yeah, we definitely need to establish some parameters here, because the sources we're working from today contain very strong, very definitive opinions.
Right.
Vivekananda spoke openly and critically about various world religions. I mean, he talks about Christianity, Buddhism, Islam. He made these really sharp, somewhat provocative comparisons between Eastern and Western civilizations.
And he goes deep into Indian social systems too, right?
Exactly, like the caste system.
Mm.
So, as your guides today on this deep dive, we want to remind you that we are completely impartial.
100%.
We are not taking sides, nor are we endorsing or validating any of these specific viewpoints. Our role here is strictly to report, contextualize, and just analyze Vivekananda's historical and philosophical arguments exactly as they're presented in the text.
We are just the messengers exploring the ideas. So let's transport ourselves back to Chicago, 1893.
The world's Parliament of Religions.
Yeah, an event tied to the massive Columbian Exposition. The sources actually describe the audience Vivekananda faced as a sea of mind.
I love that phrase.
Me too. It was this young, tumultuous, highly energetic Western audience, and they're riding the absolute high of the rapid industrial and scientific progress of the 19th century.
Which is such a crucial context.
And confronting them was Vivekananda, a monk representing this ancient, introspective, calm ocean of Indian spiritual development.
The contrast there, it just couldn't have been more striking.
Right.
You have the rapid external expansion of the American and European Industrial Revolution. I mean, literally physically manifested all around them in Chicago.
Right, the trains, the factories, the electricity.
Exactly. Meeting the deep, internal, centuries-long introspection of Indian philosophy. So Vivekananda steps up to the podium. And keep in mind, he's surrounded by religious leaders who are largely there to represent very exclusive creeds.
Right. Their implicit and honestly sometimes explicit goal was to argue why their specific path was the one true way and why all the others were, at best, incomplete.
Right.
And then he begins, Sisters and Brothers of America.
There are the 5 words.
Those are the 5 words. The sources say that simple opening filled his heart with joy unspeakable as the crowd just erupted. But I have to ask why. Speakers use pleasantries all the time. Why did Sisters and Brothers trigger a standing ovation?
Because it completely dismantled the fundamental architecture of the room.
How so?
Well, instead of addressing them formally as, ladies and gentlemen, or positioning himself as this foreign outsider addressing a separate group, he instantly dissolved the boundary between East and West. He literally claimed them as family.
Wow.
But what's truly fascinating is the underlying philosophy that allowed him to say that with total sincerity. He wasn't just employing some rhetorical trick to win over the crowd. He was introducing a revolutionary concept to that specific audience.
Which was?
The ancient Vedantic idea that all religions are valid paths. In his addresses, he actually quotes the Bhagavad Gita to bring this idea to life. He says, "All these are threaded upon me as pearls upon a string."
Pearls upon a string. That is a beautiful image, but I actually want to push back on that a little bit.
Go for it.
If every religion is a pearl on the same string, does that mean he's saying all religions are exactly the same? Because historically, functionally, they clearly have very different rules, different gods, different concepts of the afterlife entirely.
Oh, he is absolutely not saying they are all the same in their external forms. Not at all. That's actually the genius of the pearl metaphor.
How does that work?
Think about a pearl necklace. The metaphor acknowledges the distinct beauty, the color, the shape of every single pearl. And those pearls represent the unique rituals, the myths, and the doctrines of every single belief system.
Yeah, I see.
But he insists that the exact same divine thread connects them all at their core. He told his audience that humanity is not traveling from error to truth. We aren't moving from a quote-unquote wrong religion to a right religion.
We're moving from truth to truth.
Exactly. From a lower truth to a higher truth.
He used a really memorable story to drive this home. The story of the frog in the well.
Yes, this is a classic.
It's so good. So imagine a little frog who has lived his entire life in a really small well. He thinks it's the whole world. He cleans the water, gets fat and sleek, and is just perfectly content.
Living his best life.
Exactly. But one day, another frog, who happens to be from the sea, falls into this well. The well frog looks at him and asks, "Where are you from?" The sea frog says, "The sea." So the well frog takes a little leap across his well and asks, "Is your sea as big as my well?"
And Sea Frog just laughs. He explains that it's complete nonsense to compare the vast sea to a tiny little well.
Right. But the well frog, whose entire reality is literally confined to those brick walls, gets furious. He declares the sea frog a liar and basically demands he be kicked out.
It's a funny story, but Vivekananda used this deceptively simple analogy to diagnose the root cause of human division.
The well frog syndrome.
Exactly. He told the audience, "I am a Hindu, sitting in my little well thinking it is the whole world. The Christian sits in his well, thinking it is the whole world. The Mohammedan sits in his well. We all sit in our little wells, completely rejecting the vastness of the sea outside."
That is a direct, unfiltered indictment of bigotry. He's basically telling a room full of the world's top religious leaders that they are behaving like frogs in a well.
He was gentle in his delivery, but the philosophical critique behind it was devastating. He asserts in the text that bigotry and fanaticism are not just, annoying personality traits.
They're destructive.
Highly destructive. He calls them horrible demons that have drenched the earth in human blood, destroyed entire civilizations, and sent whole nations to despair. He expressed his fervent hope that the bell which tolled to open the Chicago Convention would be the death knell to all fanaticism and persecution.
He also made a massive distinction during these addresses that I think modern society still really trips over. He said, "We believe not only in universal toleration, but we accept all religions as true."
That's a huge pivot.
It is, because wait a minute, we are constantly taught today that tolerance is the highest virtue in a diverse society. Why is he drawing such a hard line between tolerance and acceptance? What is wrong with tolerance?
It comes down to the subtle power dynamic that is hidden inside the word tolerance. Think about what it actually means to tolerate something.
I guess it means putting up with it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It implies that the one doing the tolerating is in the superior, correct position, graciously allowing some misguided inferior to exist. It's a deeply condescending posture.
Wow, yeah, when you put it like that.
Vivekananda actively rejected that. He argued for universal acceptance. He used this magnificent imagery of gathering all the religious attempts of humanity from what he called the lowest fetishism to the highest absolutism and binding them all together with a cord of love to make a wonderful bouquet of worship.
So in this bouquet, none of the flowers are considered weeds.
None of them.
They are all necessary for the arrangement. That must have been a completely mind-bending concept for a 19th century audience accustomed to strict, exclusive dogmas.
Well, without a doubt.
But to understand how he arrived at this profound inclusivity, we have to look at the very foundation of his worldview. We have to look at how he redefined what religion and science even are, starting with the sacred texts of India, the Vedas. Vivekananda tells his audience that the Vedas are actually not books.
Correct. And this is a massive paradigm shift. For thousands of years, the Vedas were understood as the ultimate textual authority in Hinduism. But Vivekananda completely reframes them for a modern audience. He defines them as the accumulated treasury of spiritual laws discovered by different persons in different times.
Spiritual laws.
Yes, he makes a direct comparison to the physical sciences to explain this to the Western crowd. Think about Isaac Newton and the law of gravitation. Gravity existed long before Newton discovered it.
Right. Apples were falling out of trees for millennia before he ever wrote a single thing down.
Exactly. And if tomorrow all of humanity suddenly suffered amnesia and forgot the formulas for gravity, the law would still exist. It would still govern the physical world.
Okay, I see where this is going.
Vivekananda argues that it is identically the same with the laws that govern the spiritual world, the moral, ethical, and spiritual relations between souls. These laws existed before they were discovered by the ancient Indian sages, the rishis, and they will remain eternally, even if every single copy of the Vedas is burned.
So the books we call the Vedas are just the recorded discoveries of these pre-existing universal laws.
Precisely.
He's making spirituality sound like theoretical physics. He is stripping away all the mysticism and presenting it as a hard science of the mind.
That was his deliberate intention. He wanted to reconcile ancient wisdom with the modern empirical mind. And this logical framework extends directly to his view on the creation of the universe. He argues fiercely against the standard theological idea of creation as a one-time event, orchestrated by a creator who just suddenly decided to make something out of nothing.
Right, because logically, if God was resting and then suddenly decided to create the universe, that implies God underwent a change of mind. And our sources point out his strict logic here. If something can change, it is mutable. And if it's mutable, it can eventually be destroyed, which would mean God could die.
Which, philosophically speaking, is an absolute absurdity for an infinite being. Therefore, Vivekananda posits that creation and the creator are two parallel lines without beginning or end. He says, systems after systems are being evolved out of chaos, made to run for a time and again destroyed.
It's a cyclical universe of continuous expansion and contraction.
Yes. It maps incredibly well onto the scientific principle of the conservation of energy and, honestly, even modern cosmological theories about the expansion and contraction of the universe.
So if the universe is this endless cyclical machine of spiritual laws and cosmic energy, the natural question for you, the listener, is, where do you fit into this? Who are you? Are you a physical body that happens to possess a soul? Or are you a spirit that is currently just driving around in a biological suit?
Vivekananda is unequivocal on this. You are a spirit living in a body. The body will inevitably decay and die, but the spirit will not. He quotes the ancient texts to describe the soul, saying, "Him the sword cannot pierce, him the fire cannot burn, him the water cannot melt."
He describes the true soul using this wild geometrical paradox. He says it is a circle whose circumference is nowhere, but whose center is located in the body.
That's a brilliant way to phrase it.
The circumference is nowhere, meaning it is infinite, unbounded by space or time, yet we experience it anchored right here, right now, in our physical form. But this brings up a massive, glaring contradiction to me.
Lay it on me.
If my soul is this eternal, perfect, infinite circle, why did I get so incredibly angry in traffic this morning? Why do we get sick? Why do we suffer? Why does a perfect soul experience the illusion of being an imperfect, vulnerable body?
You are hitting right on the concept of Maya, which is often translated as delusion or illusion. How does the infinite get tricked into thinking it is finite?
Exactly.
When Vivekananda is confronted with this ultimate theological paradox, the bridge between the absolute and the relative, he doesn't invent some convoluted myth. He doesn't hide behind dense theological jargon. He gives a stunningly brave, intellectually honest answer.
Which is,
I do not know.
that is amazing to me. A spiritual leader standing in front of thousands of people being asked the absolute ultimate question of existence, and he just says, I don't know.
It is a profound demonstration of intellectual humility. He is acknowledging the absolute limits of human reasoning. He's essentially saying, I do not know how the perfect being came to think of itself as imperfect, but the fact is a fact for all that. We all experience the consciousness of being tied to a body. He accepts the reality of the human experience without pretending to know the mechanical why behind the cosmic illusion.
But he does give us a framework to cope with it, which I love. He uses the analogy of the sky and the clouds to explain how we should view our struggles. Imagine your soul as the infinite, unchangeable, vast blue sky. Our lifetimes, our physical bodies, our daily pleasures, and our daily pains, those are all just clouds passing over the sky.
And some of those clouds are dark, heavy, and stormy, bringing tremendous suffering and grief. Some are light and fluffy, representing moments of great joy.
Right.
But the crucial takeaway from this analogy is that the clouds never actually alter the fundamental nature of the sky. The sky remains pristine and untouched right behind them. It is a fundamental error in human perception to think the sky itself has changed just because a dark cloud is temporarily obscuring it.
So it's a mistake to think we are inherently impure, broken, or limited just because our physical or emotional circumstances currently are.
Exactly.
Understanding that the soul is this infinite, unburnable sky naturally leads to a very practical question. If I'm an infinite being, how am I supposed to act when I clock into my stressful job on Tuesday morning?
The perennial question.
Right. How does this ancient philosophy survive contact with modern, everyday life? And that is exactly what Vivekananda addresses in volumes 2 and 3 with his breakdown of the practical yogas. He didn't just leave these ideas in the clouds, he provided systematic paths yogas for different personality types. Let's start with the path of action. Karma yoga.
Karma, in this specific philosophical context, simply means work or action. And Vivekananda makes a highly counterintuitive point right out of the gate regarding how human character is actually formed. We generally operate under the assumption that happiness, praise, and comfort are the ultimate goals of life, and that these positive experiences are what build us up.
But he argues the exact opposite. He claims that misery is a far greater teacher than happiness. He says poverty and blows bring out our inner fire much more than praise does. I have to be honest, that contradicts almost everything modern psychology tells us about positive reinforcement and trauma. How does he justify wanting us to embrace poverty and blows?
It's important to clarify that he isn't advocating for seeking out abuse or artificially creating suffering. Rather, he's analyzing the historical reality of human development. If you look at the greatest, most impactful characters in world history, it is almost universally true that their strength, their resilience, and their profound empathy were forged in the crucible of immense difficulty, not in lives of uninterrupted leisure.
So it's about the resilience built through overcoming.
Yes. Karma Yoga teaches that the ultimate goal of mankind is not pleasure, but knowledge. Pleasure inevitably comes to an end. If we mistakenly believe pleasure is the goal of life, we will be endlessly miserable when it fades. The blows of life force us to look deeper, past the superficial, to uncover the knowledge of our true infinite nature.
So how do we work in a way that brings us this knowledge and keeps us off the hamster wheel of chasing temporary pleasure? Vivekananda talks about the secret of work. He says, let the end and the means be joined into one.
This is his powerful antidote to the modern condition of constant transactional living. We are always working for something else. We work for the weekend, for the promotion, for the applause, for the paycheck.
Always looking at the finish line.
Exactly. Karma Yoga says to do the work as the highest worship, without attachment to the reward. When you are engaged in an action, devote your entire being to it for that moment.
To really drive this point home, he loved to illustrate it with the story of the Vyata. The Vyata is a butcher. Now, we need to understand the social context of ancient India here. A butcher was performing a highly stigmatized, socially lowly task. Yet in this story, an ascetic monk, a man who has spent years meditating in the forest, who thinks he has achieved this high spiritual status, is sent by a divine voice to learn the highest spiritual truths. And who is he sent to?
This ordinary butcher, and also to an everyday woman managing her household chores.
The monk is initially appalled, naturally.
Oh, his ego is completely bruised. But the lesson is designed to completely shatter that spiritual pride. The butcher and the woman were the greatest yogis, not because they ran away to a cave, and not because they performed elaborate mystical rituals.
They achieved profound spiritual realization entirely through the path of right action.
Right. They simply performed their daily duties, no matter how mundane or socially frowned upon, perfectly, unselfishly, and with total dedication. They proved that the path to enlightenment is not about what you do, but how you do it.
Which brings us to a different path, for a completely different type of mind. Raja Yoga, the path of mental control. This is the path that involves the practices we typically associate with the word yoga today, breathing exercises, posture, and deep meditation. But it's so much deeper than just relaxing or stretching.
Raja Yoga operates on the premise that the physical and the mental are inextricably linked. It argues that you cannot hope to master the chaotic fluctuations of the mind without first understanding and mastering the vital energies of the physical nervous system.
It's biological.
Yes, very grounded in the body. Vivekananda poses a stark, almost provocative challenge to humanity here. He asks, What is the fundamental difference between human beings and animals if humans remain entirely enslaved to their sensory impulses?
If all we do is react to hunger, seek physical comfort, and avoid pain, we are just highly efficient intellectual animals. He makes the point that you can read thousands of books, you can build incredible infrastructure, you can even do good philanthropic works, but if you are a slave to your own anxieties, your anger, and your sensory desires, you are not truly a free being.
That is why Raja Yoga places such a strong emphasis on observing the mind and conserving physical energy. He specifically discusses the concepts of purity and chastity. The underlying theory is that the immense vital energy that humans normally dissipate in purely physical, sensory, or emotional outbursts can be harnessed.
Repurposed, basically.
Exactly. Through intense discipline and concentration, that raw energy is transmuted into ohas, which is the highest form of spiritual and intellectual power. It's an internal alchemy. It's about taking the wild, reactive forces of the mind and bringing them under conscious, deliberate control.
But for those who are more intellectually inclined, who want to understand the pure philosophy of it all, he offers Jnana Yoga, the path of knowledge and unity. This is where we encounter the concept of Advaita, or non-dualism.
Advaita is the philosophical pinnacle of his message. To understand non-dualism without getting lost in jargon, imagine a gold necklace, a gold ring, and gold coin.
Okay.
They all have different names, different shapes, and different practical uses. But the fundamental, unchanging reality of all three objects is simply gold.
Right.
Advaita argues that the universe is exactly like that. The endless variety of people, planets, animals, and objects were just different names and forms. The underlying reality behind all of them is one single, undivided, infinite consciousness.
To explain how humanity is slowly waking up to this realization, Vivekananda uses the brilliant analogy of a boiling kettle. When you put a kettle of water on the stove, you initially see one little bubble rise to the surface, then another, and another. They seem completely separate and distinct at first.
But as the heat steadily increases, more bubbles form, and eventually they all rush together in a massive rolling boil. They completely lose their individual boundaries.
Vivekananda believed the history of the world is operating on a similar principle, didn't he?
He did. Each individual, each nation, seems like a separate bubble. We have our rigid borders, our distinct languages, our differing religions, but the heat of historical progress and spiritual evolution is causing these bubbles to expand and interact. He firmly believed that despite all our current jealousies, wars, and hatreds, all these individual souls and nations are inevitably merging toward that realization of oneness.
But to realize that oneness, Jnana Yoga requires a massive pivot in how we look for truth. The sources quote the ancient text saying, "The self-existent one projected the senses outwards." That is why our eyes look out, our ears hear outward sounds. We are biologically hardwired to focus on the external physical world.
We look outward for everything.
For most of history, humanity has looked outward for God. We looked up at the stars or worshipped terrifying storms, trying to find the divine outside of ourselves.
But the wise, the text says, turn their eyes inwards. They realize a fundamental logical truth. Trying to find the infinite in the finite, external, ever-changing world is impossible. The only access point to the infinite we possess is the consciousness within.
The subjective experience.
Exactly. The massive shift of Jnana Yoga is moving from worshiping an external, separate creator in the sky to realizing the divine existence within the self.
We've covered action, mind, and knowledge. But the outline of our deep dive promises one more path, and we absolutely cannot leave it out. Bhakti Yoga, the path of devotion. Because not everyone is a stoic worker or a deeply intellectual philosopher. Some people are driven primarily by profound emotion.
Yes, Bhakti Yoga is the path of love. But Vivekananda is very careful to define what true spiritual love actually is. It is not the transactional begging kind of religion that is so common.
It's not a vending machine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not going to a temple or church to pray for a promotion or a new house or for your enemies to be punished. That, he argues, is basically just business. True bhakti is unselfish love for the sheer sake of love. It is the intense emotional realization that the divine is the ultimate beloved.
The Bhakti Yogi doesn't want anything from God. They just want to dissolve into that love.
It takes the intense emotional energy that humans usually direct toward romantic partners or worldly passions and redirects it entirely toward the infinite.
Okay, let's take all of this. The universal acceptance of the parliament, the infinite sky of the soul, and these four paths of action, mind, knowledge, and devotion, and see how Vivekananda applied them to the real world. Because when he returned to India after his time in the West, he gave a famous series of lectures from Colombo to Almora. He took these ancient ideas and pointed them directly at the future of modern society, completely destroying the boundary between what we consider sacred and what we consider secular.
This is arguably one of his most transformative ideas for the everyday person. If we truly accept the Advaita philosophy, that the many and the one are the exact same reality, like the gold and the jewelry, then a massive life-altering consequence follows. There can be absolutely no distinction between the sacred and the secular.
The quote from the text is a literal battle cry. To labor is to pray, to conquer is to renounce. It completely demolishes the guilt trip that you have to be sitting in a pew to be close to God, and that being at work or changing a diaper or crunching numbers is somehow less than or unspiritual.
Precisely. If the one is manifesting as the many, then the mechanic's workshop, the student's desk, and the farmer's field are just as holy as the monk's meditation cell. He stated that art, science, and religion are simply three different ways of expressing a single underlying truth. When you truly internalize this, your entire life becomes religion. There is no separation. You don't have to escape the world to find peace. You transform your interaction with the world.
And he applied this specifically to the destiny of his homeland. He looked at India's role in world history, and he didn't see a nation destined for political or military conquest. He viewed India as a vast dynamo.
A dynamo of spiritual energy. He argued that the peculiar historical mission of the Indian race was to conserve, preserve, and accumulate profound spiritual energy over millennia. And then, whenever a great conquering nation like the Roman Empire in ancient times or the British Empire in modern times builds the infrastructure to connect the different parts of the globe, India's role is to pour forth in a deluge on the world that accumulated spiritual light.
The conquerors build the roads, but India provides the philosophy that travels on them.
What a great way to put it, yes.
Now, remember our impartiality disclaimer from the beginning, because here is where Vivekananda offers a very sharp, uncompromising critique of Western civilization based on what he observed during his travels in America and Europe. He states that civilizations built purely on the sand foundations of material comfort, technological superiority, and political ambition will inevitably totter and die.
He pulls no punches.
He really doesn't. He says the history of the world is a graveyard of nation after nation that based its greatness entirely on materialism, only to crumble to dust.
He contrasts this with civilizations built on spirituality. He argues that despite facing immense oppression, poverty, and centuries of foreign rule as India had, the culture survives. He compares the Indian civilization to a phoenix, destroyed 1,000 times over the centuries, but always ready to spring up again more glorious than before, because its foundational bedrock is the immortal spirit, not perishable matter.
And to wake up this phoenix, to wake up the people of India, and by extension the entire world, he zeroed in on what he identified as the most repeated adjective in all the ancient Upanishads. Abhi, fearless.
Fearlessness is the ultimate cornerstone of his entire message. And to illustrate what true fearlessness looks like, Vivekananda loved to recount a stunning historical anecdote involving Alexander the Great.
This is my favorite story.
It's so cinematic. Alexander, the ultimate conqueror of the material world, reaches the Indus River in India. He has subjugated everything in his path. He's the most powerful man on the planet. And there, he encounters a naked Indian sage, a sannyasin, sitting peacefully on a rock in the forest.
Alexander is so blown away by the wisdom and calm of this old man that he tries to tempt him. He offers him unimaginable wealth, gold, honor, anything he wants, if the sage will just come back to Greece with him to be his personal teacher.
And the sage just smiles and slightly refuses.
Yeah.
Alexander, who's used to absolute obedience, completely loses his temper. He draws his sword and threatens him. I will kill you if you do not come.
The contrast here is the crux of Vivekananda's philosophy.
Huh.
You have Alexander, representing the absolute pinnacle of Western material success. He has conquered the known physical world. And you have the sage, representing the absolute pinnacle of Eastern internal success. He has conquered his own mind. And how does the sage respond to a literal death threat from the most powerful man on earth?
He bursts out laughing.
He laughs in his face.
He tells the emperor that he has never told a greater falsehood in his life. He says, "Who can kill me? Me you kill emperor of the material world? Never, for I am spirit unborn and undecaying. You kill me, child that you are."
Child that you are. To Alexander the Great. He calls the conqueror of the world a child because Alexander only understands the fragile physical body. That is the ultimate mic drop in philosophical history.
Absolutely.
That's the exact strength Vivekananda was trying to inject into the veins of humanity. He diagnosed society's core problem as the hypnotism of weakness.
And that diagnosis is perhaps more relevant today than ever. We are constantly taught by societal expectations, by our own failures, by cynical media, and sometimes even by our own religions, that we are weak, impure, or limited. We are hypnotized from birth into believing we are merely fragile biological machines at the mercy of a random universe.
A completely disempowering worldview.
Vivekananda's antidote to this mass hypnotism is a rallying cry. Arise, awake, and stop not till the goal is reached. He demands that we deliberately dehypnotize ourselves. If you think yourself weak, you will be weak. If you think yourself strong, omnipotent, and omniscient, that is exactly what you will manifest.
He literally urges people to teach their children that they are divine from the moment they are born, not to teach them weakness or fear. It is a call to absolute, unapologetic spiritual empowerment. Wow. We have covered an immense, staggering amount of ground today. Let's do a rapid-fire recap of this deep dive before we wrap up.
We started in Chicago, 1893, where Vivekananda shattered the frog-in-the-well mentality. He proposed not merely the tolerance of other faiths, but the universal acceptance of all religions as uniquely beautiful pearls threaded on a single divine string.
We explored the architecture of the cosmos and the soul, realizing that we are not fragile bodies, but the infinite, unburnable blue sky, merely observing the temporary clouds of pleasure and pain passing by.
We unpacked the 4 practical yogas. We learned from Karma Yoga that misery is a profound teacher, and that the butcher's daily work is as holy as the monk's meditation. We saw how Raja Yoga demands we conquer our senses to stop being mere animals. We explored the non-dualistic oneness of Jnana Yoga and the unselfish pure love of Bhakti Yoga.
And finally, we saw his vision of the secular as entirely sacred and his ultimate call to reject the hypnotism of weakness and embrace absolute fearlessness of hit.
This brings us to the end of our analysis of the complete works, but the implications of these ideas extend far beyond the text and right into the reality of our daily lives.
Exactly. Before we give you our final thought, please remember to subscribe to the Simplified Summary YouTube channel. Leave a comment below with your biggest aha moment from today's deep dive. Was it the frog in the well? The realization that you are the sky, not the clouds? Let us know. And please share this video with a friend who needs a profound boost of strength today.
And now, we want to leave you with a final lingering question to ponder based on the vast ideas we've explored today. Vivekananda said that the greatest conqueror in the world is a mere child when he tries to control his own mind, and that humanity is suffering from a massive hypnotism of weakness.
Think about that.
If you truly deeply internalize his idea that your mind and your soul contain the exact same infinite power and divinity as the creator of the universe, what is the very first impossible problem in your life that you would tackle the moment this deep dive ends?